Hello, good day, everybody. This is 𝗟𝗲𝗏𝗂 from CocoaTown. We thank you all for joining us today on a Saturday to listen about the mystery of the milk chocolate webinar. So first, we want to give a brief introduction of CocoaTown because we see a lot of new people have joined this webinar. So just give us like 5 minutes. I'm going to share little, brief outline of what is CocoaTown. We have been in business from 1992 under parent company InnoConcepts. We were basically trading the equipment, and then in 2007 and 8, when the economy tanked, then we had to pivot, and then we started see what to do. Then we were looking at what these machines are used for. Then there were a lot of different ways these machines were used. Then we found out a couple of chocolate makers were trying to make chocolate, but they didn't have the right equipment. Apart from being a chocolate maker, they also had to be an engineer and mechanic to reinvent the machine. Like there had to be MacGyvers in US. There's a show in those days in 1970s, 80s called MacGyver, where he takes an ordinary thing and repurposes it for different things. But then we told them, hey, you don't have to worry about repurposing. We will give you the machine that's needed for the chocolate industry. So we were fortunate to have a lot of customers giving us a feedback, what they are looking for in a machine and what they would like to see. So we constantly improved. So from 2006, we have been selling the machines, and we are happy to tell you some of these machines are still in use. So these are good machines that, if you take good care of them and with the minimum wear and tear parts, you can keep using it. And then we wanted to commit to be a pioneer in the industry, enabling the chocolate makers around the world, not in just one country or anything, and also help the cocoa farmers in the process. So we might now facilitate the evolution of the cocoa as a superfood, because earlier chocolate was seen as a junk food. As women, we love chocolate, but then there were so many calorie laden chocolates, people were afraid to eat chocolate. But then the pioneers in US, they wanted to make cocoa as a superfood, and CocoaTown has been happy to empower that. And then we also enable Chocopreneurs with machines at affordable prices, because we have the same fixed price regardless where you are located. We want to make sure it's accessible to everybody regardless of their economic status. And also we help the cocoa farmers to produce flavor beans or specialty cocoa beans. That's for the bean to bar or the craft chocolate movement, where they can sell it for a higher price than selling in the commodity market. Also, they can also make chocolate at the origin countries, and then increase their income that way. Then this is a small timeline of our history. So we started in 1994. We started selling first Indian wet grinders. In 2007, we had the commercial grinders, and CocoaTown start, the small machines in 2006, 2007, commercial grinders, and then now we have the whole gamut of machines for the different processes, from roasting, cracking and winnowing, and grinding. So also we have the machines. It's all innovative machines. We have patents for our machines. So, and then the 2020 came in, and then we had to reinvent ourselves. So we had to pivot, because all over the world people were hurting. A lot of places there was a shutdown because of the pandemic. So we thought we have to help the chocopreneurs to be successful. So we started doing more of education. So we also now have the equipment and evaluation tools. Now we are creating online resource for anybody to go and look at it anytime, and they can find the information they need. That's the way these webinars are working. So when we have the webinars, we record it, and then we are going to put it in a library so people can access it. And then now we are also working on developing new machines and accessories that's going to help people more. So what is 2021? We are hoping to return to normal life, especially now the vaccine is rolled out. Most of the countries, they have started giving. So we want to make the virtual connections, and also we want to have the in-person connections. We are hoping the chocolate festivals will start again, maybe at least by the end of this year. And I just want to finish it with our motto, which is Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. That means it's a Sanskrit sloka that we believe in India. May all beings everywhere in the universe be happy and free, and may the thoughts, words, and actions of my own life contribute in some way to their happiness and to the freedom for all. We want everybody to be free from economic stress, from diseases, be happy, eat more chocolate, make the world a better place. So with that, I want to stop it, but thank you for listening to the CocoaTown history. Now, little bit about Max. Max is a true citizen of the world, I can say, because he has lived in 18 countries. He talks like 5, 6 languages, and he has worked in the milk chocolate all his life. And you can read his full bio in our website, and also you would have seen through our social media posts. And the one thing is, he is willing to explain the chocolate process so everybody can understand, not just the people, academicians, or the chemist can understand. He makes it easy for everybody to understand. So without further ado, I invite Max to take over. And just one couple of points I just want to let everybody know. Please put your phone on the mute, and don't worry if you have to leave in the middle. We are recording the session, like I said in the before, and we will send you the link so you can watch it at your own time. And today we have about people from 45 different countries. So we thank you for your support, because without you, this webinar will not be successful. So thank you all the participants, and thank you, Max. Please take over.
Okay, thank you. I must say it feels a little weird not seeing any of you. I don't know how many out there, but let me start by saying I want you to know this is not a lecture. I have one singular goal today, and that is for all of you to leave with some feeling of having gained information on making chocolate. So the most critical thing is to please ask questions. You're not interrupting me if you do. Another thing I should mention is that since we have all levels of chocolate makers, I'm not going to dive into the nitty-gritty. And instead, if any of you have highly technical queries, send them to me by email. That said, for all of you, I will make myself available at pretty much any time on WhatsApp, WeChat, or Skype. And then you don't have to take notes. I'm going to put a document together which includes everything that I say today and more, and it should be out next week for any of you who want it. And then one last thing, please, if I speak too fast, tell me. I tend to, and I don't want any of you to get lost by that. Now, the crux of us getting together is to talk about milk chocolate, but I think I would be remiss if I didn't give a brief history of milk chocolate and a quick overview of the world market, specifically because this is a good time to be in chocolate. And then I want to give an example of regulations so you know that you have to look at each country's laws, that they vary drastically. I'm going to use UK, US, and EU. A few things that I'm not going to cover. I'm not going to cover roasting. I'm not going to cover milk crumb. I'm not going to cover sugar substitutes, stress and shear, and the specifics of Casson value. I'm not going to cover. Again, if you have questions, hold on a second. I want to make sure that I see this. If you have any questions that are technical, please email me. Please email me. So now, a quick history of chocolate. A lot of people claim, or not a lot of people, but some people claim that Sir Hans Sloane invented milk chocolate in the 1700s, early 1700s, but he didn't. It was actually a process. It was originally consumed as a drink, and because when it was ground with sugar, it was unpalatable, too hard to eat, and had a bitter taste. And so in 1828, a man from Holland named Van Houten created a way to extract cocoa butter from the cocoa bean, which enabled extra fat to be put into cocoa, and that allowed the concept of an eating chocolate to emerge. In 1847, in the UK, a man by the name of J.S. Fry made the combination of sugar, chocolate, liqueur, and cocoa butter, making what was arguably the first chocolate bar. Now, it cut to 1875, some say 1876, and that's when Daniel Peter invented the milk chocolate. And by that I mean he's the one who incorporated milk powder into the process. Milk powder was invented in 1802 in Russia, so obviously, Sloan couldn't have invented it before that existed. He had a neighbor who happened to be Henry Nestlé, and he partnered with him, and then 4 years later, they premiered their chocolate on the world. However, it wasn't until 1879 when the milk chocolate became what we consider our version of milk chocolate. And that's when Rudolf Lindt, who invented the conching machine, once went home for the weekend. This is legend says. He went home for the weekend and left the conching machine running for 3 days. And so when he came back, he was shocked to find this mixture that was incredibly smooth, and then put that into the market. So that's when it really began, 1879. So that's the brief history of milk chocolate. Any questions so far? Yeah, I will talk about milk powder. Okay, I have some good questions. Okay, so okay, I'll get to these questions a bit later. Okay, so now numbers for all of you to understand. 2020 numbers. Europe represented 36.56% of the market. North America was 27.18%. Asia Pacific was 10.98%. South America was also 10.98%, and Middle East and Africa was 7.03%. The top 5 countries were US, they say between 16 and 18%, then Germany, 9 to 11%, then Belgium, 8 to 11 to 10%, France, 5 to 7%. So they're the numbers. Now, the interesting thing, the good thing about chocolate is that it was pandemic proof fundamentally. It did slow down, but the upward growth, the positive growth in the market was not affected by the virus. And now the projections from now until 2025 is that the CAGR, the compound annual growth rate across the world, will be 4.25%. And what that means is from today until 2025, the market will grow by 24%. Now in specific regions, the biggest growth is going to be seen in Asia Pacific, where their number is 4.62%, which is above the 4.25% of the world. The next is Middle East and Africa, which is 4.46%, which is also above the average. Everyone else is below. South America is 4.2%, North America is 4.17%, and Europe is 4.11%. The dominating beliefs about what are market drivers and trends are: one is a growing awareness of the health of dark chocolate, so that market is growing. A rising interest in ruby chocolate, a growing emphasis on sustainable cocoa production, the ability to personalize and customize chocolate on a mass scale, and clean label chocolate. What that means is it's like gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, organic. Those are the ones that they're saying, and then also premium chocolates. Those are the market driving forces. That's it for the market. I'll send you a more detailed report, like I said. Now, I have a problem when I first started, and a lot of people have this problem with terminology. There are things that are said that people say differently, so let's just get a few out of the way. The first one is chocolate maker and chocolatier. A chocolate maker makes chocolate. A chocolatier works with chocolate to make sweets. Cacao versus cocoa. Cacao is the raw bean. Cocoa is after it's been processed, sold, roasted. and this is the one that I don't understand why there's so many names, chocolate or cocoa liquor, chocolate or cocoa mass, chocolate or cocoa paste. They're all the same thing. That's a thick, smooth paste you get when you grind and mill the cocoa nibs, or even the beans. Now, this is the one that I don't understand why they're different definitions. It's cocoa solids. For what it's worth, cocoa solids on a legal basis is all the ingredients that are coming from the bean. So that means the non-fat cocoa parts, which is the cocoa, and the fat part, which is the cocoa butter. A lot of people will say that cocoa solids is the non-fat parts, but not in legal, not in regulatory terms. So I say stick with what the law says. Milk solids, that's the non-water part of the milk. Not to get overly technical, but this is the fat, the protein, the lactose, and the minerals inside of milk. Now here is the regulations. I want to show you comparing the EU, the UK, and the US. In EU, dry cocoa solids cannot be less than 25%. In the UK, nothing less than 20%. In the US, they measure it differently. They do it by cocoa liqueur, and that can't be less than 10% of the weight. And this is calculated in a really convoluted way. What you do is you subtract the weight of the cocoa butter in the chocolate liqueur. So you only now have the pure cocoa, and you subtract the weights of any alkali, neutralizing, or seasoning ingredients. Then you take that number and you multiply it by 2.2, and then you divide that by the total weight of the chocolate, and then you multiply that by 100, and that should be above 10. So anyway, EU, no less than 14% milk solids. UK, no less than 20% milk solids. US, no less than 12% milk solids. EU, 25% non-fat cocoa solids, nothing less than that. UK, nothing less than 2.5, sorry, 2.5%, nothing less than 2.5 in the UK, and in the US, nothing less than 12%. Sorry. Oh no, actually, they don't have one. Sorry. EU, no less than 25% total fat. That's the cocoa butter and the milk fat. In the UK, same, 25%. In the US, no less than, oh, actually, I don't have that. I don't have that. Now, in the US, it's only milk fat, and that's no less than 3.39 milk fat. In the EU and the UK, you can use up to 5% non-cocoa vegetable fat. In the US, you can't use any. In the EU, you can use 1% emulsifiers, of which that can be 1% lecithin, or it can be 1% AMP, and no more than, yes, I will, Eric, I will be sending you all these figures in the message. There's the PGPR, 0.5%. Now, the UK has a loophole, is that if you label it as family milk chocolate, you can sell it in the EU. So that's basically the difference. So you understand that's a lot of information, but it gives you an idea that you have to look to find out what each country has. China has been the hardest one to get people. They only have the documentation in Chinese, and it's very vague. Okay, so anything relevant to these questions? Nothing. Good.
Yeah, we have more questions on the process that you're.
Yes, of course. Just want to make sure. Okay, there are a couple of things that are guidelines, not rules, but I really think they're worth noting and following, in my opinion.
Okay, Max.
Total fat content in milk chocolate should be between 33% and 55%. Now, I want to make one point that's very to clarify. You will, if you do a lot of reading, come across the strong held belief that solid fat content should be no less than 45%. Now, here's the thing. Fat content and solid fat content are completely different things. Fat content is a percentage of cocoa butter, the fat in the cocoa liqueur and the fat in the milk chocolate. That's what that is. Solid fat content is a solid to liquid ratio of fat across a temperature gradient, which most of you won't be dealing with unless you reach industrial levels. It's really hard to compute. You need certain equipment to do it. So again, fat content between 33% and 55%. And number two, the ratio of milk fat to the total fat, I say, and well, a lot of people say, keep it between 12% and 32%. Now, with regards to these two things, here's how you calculate them, just to be clear. With the total milk fat, the total fat content, what you do is you take milk powder, which normally has a fat between 26 and 42%. So we're going to say, for this sake, 30%. Cocoa butter is 100% fat, and chocolate liqueur is around 50% fat. Sugar has nothing. So let's say we're using a recipe where it's 40% sugar, 25% cocoa butter, 20% milk powder, 14.5% cocoa liquor, and 0.5 emulsifiers. So 25% of the milk chocolate is from cocoa butter, 6% is from the milk powder, that's 30% of 20%, and half of the cocoa liquor is 7.25%. So this comes to a total of 38.25%, which is between those markers that I said, so this is good. Now, if we divide this, if we divide the milk fat by this number, we get 15.69%, which is again between the margins that I mentioned. So again, fat content 33 and 55, the milk fat to total fat ratio 12% to 32%. Any questions? Okay, good. So there are 5 things that I consider the cornerstone of making a milk chocolate a good one with ease. Number 1, how do you know if a milk chocolate is good? If you like it, it's good. Clearly, if you're going to sell it to the market, you have to get other people's opinions, but you got to trust your taste. You can't let terminology and books and quote unquote experts tell you that you're wrong. If you like it, it's good. Number 2, the 2 major distinguishing characteristics of chocolate are flavor and texture. And the most important part of texture is that it remains solid at room temperature, which is 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, which is 70 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and that it rapidly melts in your mouth at 37 degrees Celsius, 98.5 degrees Fahrenheit, body temperature. Number 3, understand the relationship between solid particles and fat. I'll get into that later. Number 4, understand the relationship between cocoa liqueur and sugar, or more importantly, what sugar does in the conching process. Number 5, aside from the ingredients, the importance of time, temperature, and moisture content. Okay. Now, all that's okay, a lot of information. Okay, so let's start with some things about sugar. The water content of your sugar should never exceed 0.06%. And then the invert sugar content in your sugar, most of it has it, should not be more than 0.04%. Storing sugar likes water. Storing it, you want to store it in 20 degrees Celsius, which is around 60. No, it's fine. You can store chocolate at a really low temperature. You can keep it in a fridge, so you're fine. Proper storage is at 20 degrees Celsius, which is 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and the relative humidity should be between 20 and 60%. That will keep your sugar good for a while. The most common, the most accepted, the one I suggest you use is if you're gonna use white sugar. I mean, a lot of people use cane sugar, but if you use white sugar, standard quality, medium fine, which is between 0.6 and 1 millimeters, the grain size. Now here's the thing. Sugar comes in a crystalline state. And that means that what that means is it's all arranged, the molecules in nice order. When you grind sugar, it pretty much destroys this and the sugar becomes amorphous. A fancy word for saying it has no shape. Now, the important thing is that amorphous sugar absolutely loves moisture and water. So it will absorb any moisture around until it recrystallizes, at which point it will release the water. And what you're going to end up with is even a harder, clumpy sugar. So what does this mean? It means when you grind sugar, do it right before you're going to put it into your contour, your refiner. Do not plan ahead. You want to have a minimum gap between those two things. Last point with sugar, and this is more for people who are doing big amounts, but any amount, is sugar dust is very flammable and can cause catastrophic explosions. So if you're dealing with a significant amount of it, you should have your own enclosed space with high ceilings that is well ventilated, preferably on a top floor with pressure-proof walls and fire-resistant doors. Again, small amounts, you might have a little boom, but if you're dealing with a bigger amount, this can become very dangerous. Okay, now, some things I want you to know about milk powder. There are two ways that milk powder is made. One is by being spray dried. The other one is roller dried. By far, the roller dried is better. It's hard to get. I mean, any of you who are in the US, it's practically impossible. I believe there are only 2 places that do it here. Yes, there is a difference between, well, the only difference between organic sugar and normal is flavor. I find that consumers of mainstream, people who like Dove and Hershey's, tend to not like organic sugar. Now, if you can get roller dried, get it. I can't, because I'm actually using a lactose-free milk powder that's made specifically for me, and they don't have the machines to do it. The reason why roller dryer is best, I'll answer that in an email. It has to do with it frees up the milk to be able to do other things that enhance a lot of the elements of both texture and flavor. Now, this is why I like milk chocolate. I love milk chocolate, but making it is milk powder. There are many ways that you can manipulate, change, alter the flavor through the milk powder. I'm going to give you 2 examples, the 2 most common popular ones. One, if you want to add a nutty cooked milk caramel flavor, which some people say is in Hershey's. I don't know. It's a tendency, more Americans like this flavor. I'm not a fan of it. As a whole, when tested in Europe, they're not a fan of it. I haven't seen any feedback from South America or Asia, but I have a feeling it might be just an American quirk. Now, if you want this, what you do is preheat your oven to 139, 140 degrees Celsius, 265 degrees Fahrenheit. Place the milk powder thin layer on a sheet, maybe almost a centimeter high. Put it in the oven and watch it. Stir it initially every 5 minutes, but keeping an eye on it. When it starts to brown, that's when you decide how long you want to keep it. The longer you keep it, the more of this flavor will come out. The thing is, as it starts to brown, it goes really fast. So you got to be stirring it back 2 minutes, then 1 minute, then 30 seconds. Otherwise, what will happen is it will start to congeal and form these little puddles that make it useless. You don't want this. Now, just so you know what this is officially called, it's called the Maillard effect. Maillard effect is a ubiquitous thing. When you cook a steak, the browning of the steak is the same thing. What this does for food is it releases a lot of new flavors unique to that process. Now, I don't want to get too much into the technicality, but this is not caramelization. Caramelization is at a much higher temperature. This is the Maillard effect. So if you want that, you can also do it with sugar. I'll put that in the document, but the biggest impact is with the milk. Okay, second way you can use milk powder to change your chocolate, and that is if you want more of a buttery flavor. Now there are two ways to do this: is you use high fat powders, or you use anhydrous milk fat, AMF. Now, when you do this, when you use these things, just make sure that your total fat content doesn't go off the charts. When you're adding this stuff, you're adding so much more fat that you got to pull down on everything else. If you use these, I strongly recommend that you use fat-free milk powder, because it's absolutely amazing the control you have over the milk chocolate's viscosity, texture, and flavor, because of how you can control when you put the fat in. It's a wonderful thing. I can't use it, again, because my dairy cannot make this lactose-free. But if you can, awesome. You'll love it. Okay. Any questions?
Somebody asked, do you want to talk about alternate milk powders?
Yeah, I mean, alternate milk powders. Well, I mean, you know, that there's a vegetable-based products that people are using to make dairy-free. Dairy-free is possible. I've never experimented with it, but I can give you. I'll look it up and get it for you. I'll put it in a list. Once the milk chocolate has crystallized.
Thank you.
I think the reason why your milk chocolate is behaving that way after when you try to temper it is you're heating it up too quickly. Yes, and again, in skim powder, I've used skim powder just on its own without anything, but skim powder in combination with high fat or anhydrous milk fat, that's when it becomes rock and roll. Okay. Now, officially, once you have cocoa liqueur, there's 5 steps, standard, and these are mixing, then refining, and conching, then tempering, then molding. I have a different take on how to do this, which I'll bring up. But let me just get through. Well, I have a take of the first 3: the mixing, refining, and conching. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. So I'm going to bring that up. So let me just get over the other 2 first, because they're oak powder will thicken. Yes. Okay. That's strange during tempering. I'm going to bring up how I temper, how you should temper, and you tell me if this is the way you're doing it. Now, I've found that tempering is incredibly important. It's frustrating for many, but it's actually straightforward. It's important because, I mean, as many of you who do this know, the snap of the chocolate, the melt, the mouth melt, the mouth feel, and the shiny coloring, and the uniformity of the homogeneity depends on good tempering. It's frustrating because it seems like I mean, as you're Eric to bringing up, and Nico, it seems like one small move and you ruin everything. But hopefully this will help clarify things, because fundamentally it's really straightforward. Cocoa butter can stabilize in 6 different crystal forms. Isabel, I'll let you know. I'm gonna come to my theory and how to do that.
Max,
yeah.
Can I interrupt for a second? When you're answering, all the people cannot see the chat. So you
okay. Ok, en un momento se agrega la leche. ¿En qué momento? when do you add the milk powder? I'm going to bring that up. Yeah, I mean, the adding milk powder and the congealing and the sticking and the jamming the machines. Sadly, if you're using tabletop small things, this is going to be something that you have to, I'm going to give you one way that you can reduce this, but more than likely, it'll always be a little bit of an issue. Sí, Tanya, hablo español. Yes, absolutely. No, the relationship between the milk fat and the tempering curve, no. Well, there is in the sense of how fast you get to a melting point, but ultimately the temperature that you have to reach is the same. So as I was saying, Tanya, I'll try to do it. I'll try to do the webinar in Spanish.
No, Max, tell them that we are going to record this in Spanish after the webinar. So.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to try to do voiceover for this too. Okay, so again, going back to cocoa butter, there's 6 different levels of crystallization at which cocoa butter stabilizes, and each one has a very different physical property. Now, all you need to know is that we want to get to the 5th level, ideally the 6th level, but that's, unless you have a ton of time, you're not going to get it. So we aim for the 5th level. At this level, we get everything that we want. We get the snap, the mouth feel, the shiny cover. We don't get blooming. So how you do this, it's all about temperature. What you do is you heat up, you cool down, and then you heat up and hold it at a temperature. Up, down, up. Now, before you do this, you got to create the seed chocolate. What the seed chocolate is a chocolate that actually you accelerate to get to level 5, 6. That when you put it in small bits to the main chocolate, it helps all the chocolate achieve level 5 crystallization. So without it, there's a good chance that parts of your chocolate won't be tempered. So how you do this? You take, the standard is 25%. I don't like taking that much chocolate out. I do 20%-ish, but I do by eye, honestly, is you pour it into a container, you let it sit in a shaded area, closet, cellar, until it hardens. Hour, I mean, it will harden in a few minutes, but give it an hour. I take it one step further. I put it in a refrigerator for around 15 minutes as well. I really want to try to push it into 6, even though that really doesn't do it, but I found it helps. Now you take this out, you don't want to put it in that cold temperature. You take it out and you cut it into pieces like that big. Cut the seed chocolate into pieces around that big. Now put it on the side. What you do is, and you take the rest of the chocolate, if you're pulling it right off of your conch, it's already going to be liquid. If not, what you want to do is you put the conch in a bowl, if you're using a tempering or on the stove, and you want to heat it up to 40% Celsius, 105 degrees Fahrenheit. What this does is it breaks down all the cocoa butter and gets you ready to bring it to the 5th level of crystallization. So now when you get it all runny and smooth and uniformly melted, what you do then is you start to slowly add the seed chocolate. And no, well, yes, the temperature curve changes because the percentage of chocolate, of fat in your chocolate is different. And what will affect the point of which when your chocolate melts is how much fat you have in it. That's the reason why. So no, is there a benefit in storing the chocolate base before tempering? I don't find there is. Time in general does help, but I don't think you have to wait 3 weeks. I almost always let it sit until it gets to around 50 degrees Celsius, and then I pour it in, and that works for me. So not 50 degrees Celsius, what I'm talking about, 30 degrees Celsius. Chocolate inclusions, no, I'm sorry, I don't, Christian. I don't have any recommendations. Isabel, I'll explain that when I explain my process. Okay, so you heat it up to 40 degrees Celsius, 105 degrees Fahrenheit. You start adding the seed chocolate slowly. You want to make sure that it melts. You don't want to start loading it so fast that it gets too cold and doesn't melt. And you want to make sure that the temperature drop is gradual. If you go too fast, you've ruined your tempering. So add slowly. The longer you take, the better. And then you want to bring it down until you reach 27 degrees Celsius, which is around 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and you stop there. Any extra seed chocolate, put it aside. Then you reheat, but only a little bit. You reheat until you get to 30 degrees Celsius, which is 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's only 3 degrees Celsius. And you want to hold it at that temperature for as long as you can, 10 minutes, great. 15 minutes, fantastic. The more, the better. Now, and then you can set it, aside. You can pour it, you can make your molds. Now, if you want to, during this whole process, if you want to check to see if your tempering is working, dip a metal spoon or any metal tool you have, pull it out, set it aside. If it turns into if it hardens to a satiny, shiny, no streak chocolate, you're good. If not, don't worry about it. Reheat, take it back up to 40 degrees Celsius and restart the whole process. You haven't ruined the chocolate. You just reset the crystallization memory of the cocoa butter, and you can do it again and again. A lot of times people think, this is it, I screwed up, it's over. Not true. Molding, on a small scale, you just pour it into molds. So that's really that. Now, onto the mixing, refining, and conching. Now, on a commercial level, these are 3 discrete steps. And the industry standard, the one that everybody talks about, references, suggests, is you start by blending the dry ingredients with a portion of cocoa butter by means of a high shearing and kneading method. And what this does is it homogenizes, it uniforms the particles, it releases trapped and immobilized fat, and it adds a thin layer of fat to the particles. Next step is you take this paste and you run it through a 2-roller refiner. The 2-roller refiner sets the particles on a uniform size and makes them smaller, not the final point of being small. And I should bring up a point of sizes. Next is a 5-roller refiner. This reduces the particles to its final size that you want, and it distributes the cocoa butter evenly over all the other particles. That leads into the conching. In industrial conching, none of it is about making particles smaller. It's primarily twofold. One is to remove undesirable flavors and while developing new ones. And the second one is to then fully coat all the surfaces with fat, as well as putting just the right amount of fat between the particles, which brings me up to particle size. I think most of you who do chocolate know that below 20 microns, the human tongue can't differentiate particles. So anything below that is smooth. Even so, milk chocolates like Hershey's are around 26. So you can be higher. It's not catastrophic. It depends on what you want. Now, here's the thing. You don't want to go lower than 6 microns, So what happens when you go lower than 6 microns is all of your solid parts are so tiny, it creates so much surface area that your fat is now spread across too thin, and the gaps between each coated particle isn't enough. And so you have a product that does not give that homogeneity, wonderful feeling of oneness. Because that's what you want to do is, you want to create ultimately is a suspended product of suspended solid particles in fat. That's what that's the goal. Okay, that's the standard. Now, 2-roller refiner and a 5-roller refiner. A, they're hard to find. B, the cheapest 2-roller refiner is from China and it costs around $1,500. 5-roller refiner, I only know the one that's has pneumatic controls, and that's $25,000. So most of us won't use it. And honestly, I've used it, and I don't think it's necessary for milk chocolate. I don't think it's necessary. I also don't like, if you know the Universal or McIntyre conch, do you know this? It's a conch that it's horizontal and it has these little blades kind of thing, and it spins around and it rips the particles into smaller parts. And I find that so aggressive. I find that it bruises. I mean, there is no scientific data that backs me up completely. There are some people, but fundamentally, it's my own opinion, is I don't like the way that feels to me. I'm also not a big fan of ball mills, which I can explain if anybody's interested. But what I like, and this could be just my quirk, but I like the original. Oh, okay, Tanya, okay. Pregúntame en español. Okay, and I'll answer in English. I like the original mill, the granite mill. Now, the reason why the other systems came to be, why the 𝗏𝗏 and the Universal, the main driving point was to shorten conching time, try to get it down from 70+ hours to a few hours. Yeah, Nico, about how milk chocolate takes wet sand texture is what I've found, and I can't back this up, but this is my own experience from having done the same thing, is I find that what it does is it breaks apart the homogeneity. So now you're getting back to the individual parts. That's my own opinion. I should look it up, but. Tanya, unfortunately, the best way to lower bitterness is to add sugar. However, there is one theory that says if you take your nibs and you increase the moisture to 15% of the nibs, and then you make the chocolate liqueur out of that 15%, and then you roast it to dry it, supposedly that will reduce the acidity. However, I tried it only once and it didn't work for me. But that's the only, I've read only one white paper that addresses this as an alternative, and that's the alternative, is adding moisture content to your nibs before using it, and then when it evaporates, it pulls those that acidity out. Okay, so the original reason, the motivation, Christian, I'm about to get to that, my personal opinion. The reason why all these new conchers came about is to save time. And I say, if you have the luxury of time, there's no reason to use those other systems. There is a fundamental agreement. I'm going to bring up something that this one guy, 𝗏𝗏𝗏, he had seminal papers between 2000 and 2004, which arguably finally revealed the mystery of conching. But aside from that, highly revered papers, peer-reviewed, the standard belief is that nobody really knows what happens exactly during conching to make chocolate become so special. I think that the tedious grinding, the slow grinding of the particles while conching, while mixing with the granite does something. I think that there's, like, I don't know if any of you bought mill ground flour and how much better it is. Yeah. Let me type the name of this guy. I'll tell you what he said. Okay, so I strongly believe, and in building the factory that I'm building in Indiana and the one in China, I've designed large new mills that help with a few issues that the old ones have. If any of you in Brazil, it's the one place where you can still buy used original mélangeurs, and they're not that expensive. Big, if you want to have a chocolate factory, it's the only place in the world that right now accessible has mélangeurs of a enormous size. Okay, so going back to my three things, which is time, temperature, and moisture. Question: what would be the appropriate amount of milk? No, it's okay. I don't mind answering these questions. I'll say the appropriate amount of milk for a delicious chocolate. I'm going to pull up my quote unquote secret recipe and tell you, give away everything, right? Hold on. Okay, I'm going to give you a few standards and then what I feel personally from my experiments. Okay, the main standard is 24.4% milk, whole milk powder. The Belgian is 16%. I myself, let me find mine. Where are you? I do around 27%. Yeah, the 𝗧𝗵𝗲𝗏 is the name of the key author. He has a few different white papers with other people with him. So if you just 𝗧𝗵𝗏𝗏, it's very hard to find his papers unless you have access to a way to get peer-reviewed papers. I will see which ones I have on me, and I will include them in my document. Okay, so again, temperature, time, and moisture. Now, let's first do time. I have done countless tests, double-blind tests, and universally, 77 hours has come, 77 hours has become the sweet spot for making a great milk chocolate for me. Conching and refining. Okay, that's one thing I should actually clarify. If you go online and try to look up refining and conching, very few people are clear about this. And the reason why is because in industrial, they're separated. However, if you have a mill, a mélangeur, it's happening both at the same time. So conching is refining and refining is conching, even though it isn't. Again, like with the standard that I told you, standard practice is to get the particle size down to the ideal before you conch. You're not refining in the conching process, but the way I do it is you are, which is the original way, which is the way that it was done for over 50 years, 60 years, and the standard, again, before the new conching came out by 𝗏𝗏 and the others. Okay, so time, 75 hours is what I say. Temperature, you want to keep the temperature even throughout the process if you can. This goes back to about clogging and clumping. One of the main reasons for that to happen, do you suggest conching refining time vary with mass? No, because I think that I think that the process of releasing the unsightly flavors and getting new ones and having a slow release of the moisture, which also takes bad flavors with it, is the same. Allison, when you conch, at what point do you add? Oh, that's with no emulsifier. So at 48 hours, Allison, at 48 hours, have you added any emulsifier? No. How much, at what point did you add? Oh, you don't use any at all, ever? Oh, wow, good for you. That's a sign of a real pro, is if you can get chocolate to have the proper viscosity without it. You're better than me. When do you add your fat, Allison? When do you add your cocoa butter, I mean? So Eric, you too, kudos to, no, okay, don't do that. What you've done is you've prematurely coated, oh, Nicholas, wow, okay, kudos again to all of you. If you add all your cocoa butter at first, what you've done now is you've trapped all the other particles, all the bad things, and the texture, you've trapped it all. Yeah, no, you don't want to. What you do is, I'll tell you how to do it. No, you want to add it in 3 steps, ideally. No, you start with the nibs. So here's what you do. Okay, I told you time, the moisture. The key thing about moisture is the moisture. You can take the moisture out of milk chocolate. You can take the moisture out of sugar. If you have a vacuum drying oven, that can get those two down to the point where you won't need the conching to do that. Even in an oven, if you heat it up a bit, you can start to pull off the humidity. You don't want to accelerate the release of the moisture from the cocoa, because one of the most important things of moisture in the cocoa is to help with flavor development. So this is how I start. You take the nibs, you heat it up at around 55 degrees Celsius. You get it warm. You put that in the conch, and you have it run for around 2 hours. You should have a smell. Sometimes, I don't know how many of you, but the first smell of the cocoa is almost like this chemical, nauseous smell. Again, that's the bad stuff coming off. So run the cocoa butter, and also preheat the mélangeur. Preheat it, get it warm, have it running, and put a heater on it to get the mélangeur warm. Add in the nibs. Get it until it's a runny paste, until it's a liquor, and do that for around, I say 2 hours. Then heat the sugar also. When I heat the sugar, let me, I heat the sugar at 100 degrees Celsius, that's 212 degrees Fahrenheit, for 4 minutes. 100, sorry. Yeah, or sometimes at 120, but I heat the sugar. Okay. Well, I mean, Sergio, with you don't want the temperature to drop too low. The ideal thing is keeping it up to the maximum if you can. So what I've found is if you heat the sugar, like I said, and you start to add that, you do not refine it. That's a very important thing. A lot of people think you should refine sugar until it's really, really almost confectionery, and add that to the mélangeur. Do not do that. And this comes to the relationship between the sugar and the cocoa and what sugar does. So you add the sugar and try to make sure the heat doesn't drop. Then you add around I don't like covering the cocoa butter with the stones with cocoa butter. The fact that the nibs are 50% cocoa fat, when you put it in with that temperature, the fat in the cocoa will do that. It will lubricate the stones. Again, you don't have to preheat if you don't want to. What I do is add in the cocoa. 2 hours later, add in the sugar, and at that point, I add in I add in enough fat to get the total fat content to 17%. So this goes back to was it Allison? Yeah, was it Allison? You add only that amount. You add that amount of cocoa fat. Cocoa butter. At that point, now you preheat the milk at around 90 degrees Celsius for only 3 minutes, stirring it. You do not want the Maillard effect to kick in unless you want that flavor, but you want to get the milk really warm. And this goes to Sergio, which you're right about loosening the tension, but you start adding the milk into the mélangeur, it will eventually jam, unfortunately. At that point, what you got to do is you got to take everything out. I mean, all the stones and everything out, and have it run and put in, if you have a metal tool, to get rid of it sort of caramelizes mélangeurs on the bottom. You want to get rid of that area, and you want to mix it manually with a knife. Put everything back in, and then continue adding the milk powder. Once you have all the milk powder in it, you add enough cocoa butter, melted of course, to get the total fat content to 24%. And that's where you want to leave things. And this goes to, unfortunately, people who don't use emulsifiers. This is where, if you need to add in 0.5%, no, not 0.5%, sorry, 0.05% emulsifier, you can to help. But otherwise, this should work. My mélangeurs are super basic, and at this point, with this mixture, what you've done is you've created the perfect ratio whereby there's just enough butter and enough fat between the milk, the cocoa butter, and the nibs to be able to help break particles apart, to help lubricate the whole process, make sure clumps don't form, and start to give us thin coating on the solids. Now, this is where the sugar part comes in. Again, like I said, almost everybody would say that nobody knows. From Ziegler's reports, his reports state that very little actual flavor development happens during conching unless the temperature is above 75 degrees Celsius. What he says is that aroma molecules from the cocoa, yes, Leonard, yes, aging liqueur can make it smoother. Yeah, absolutely. But it's one of those things where there is no minimum. The most I've ever stored it for was 2.5 weeks, and at that point, for me it wasn't worth the little benefit I got. Because I'm making a milk chocolate for the American market, my investors keep telling me to add more sugar. So that's how I get rid of acidity, unfortunately. Lipstick on the pig, you know? Okay, so back to Zeigler. His studies have said that what happens during conching is that aroma molecules from the cocoa are transferred to the sugar particles. And when they are incorporated into the sugar, they actually create a different flavor. And this is what takes a lot of time. This is why I think the 8-hour conch and the 12-hour conch fall by the wayside, where that's where the 77 comes through, is because of this. And so I find this is the part that I find really interesting about sugar. And so I have a hallowed relationship between the cocoa and the sugar. One is you use coarser sugar initially. That will help, I think, exaggerate this relationship between the cocoa transferring its flavors to the sugar. So that is the, again, supposing a magical little thing. Now, after around 48 hours, I add in the rest of the cocoa fat. I use AMP and PGPR emulsifiers. They're non-soy based, and they have unique properties where they don't mess around with if you add too much by mistake, it doesn't screw with your viscosity. Okay, let me think. A few interesting points to know. When you increase fat, multiple studies have shown that there's an increased perception of sweetness, even if the sugar amount is reduced. The fat content, and that goes back to the question of how to make things less acidic. What their theory is that the perception of bitterness is decreased by the increased fat content, and that gives the illusion of a more sweet chocolate. Two, there is no direct effect of sugar on the grittiness at all. People think that too much sugar makes it grainy, and that's not true. Hardness is primarily associated with high sugar levels. The more sugar, the harder the chocolate will be. A high level of cocoa butter will eliminate the chances of getting this that oily mouthfeel that you have. So if you get the oily mouthfeel, if you're tasting along the way, one solution, the one option that I know is to add more cocoa butter. What was yeah, I'm thinking what else should I add? I guess now I'm open to questions.